walking, so he must have voted. So we'll go to Ms. Garcia of Texas, Ms. Sylvia Garcia from the great state. Well, I'm not going to say that. From Texas.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for once again bringing this very critical matter to our attention. I am not one that's complaining about the 7 hearings that we've had. I'm not the one complaining about putting more and more attention. It really is a time for action and a time for legislation. So thank you again. This is actually, it's something that's really dear to my heart because many of the items that we've been talking about are items that have stemmed from the state of Texas. As we all know, our democracy is built on the sacred principle that every American has an equal and fair right to vote. But states like my home state of Texas are imposing laws that are already limiting that sacred right. Texas and other states continue to pass laws that suppress, silence, and dilute minority voters, especially Latinos. We cannot let this stand. We must take action. It is our responsibility, our duty, to protect voting rights for every American, no matter what their zip code, where they live, or what language they speak. By banning partisan gerrymandering and creating new protections for voters, we will ensure every American can make their voice heard. History has shown us that Texas and Texas Republicans have gone to much lengths in the past and continue to do that to suppress votes. I disagree from my colleague from Texas from the other side of the aisle. Suppression is alive and well in Texas, whether or not you want to admit it. For decades, Republicans have split up and packed communities of color to dilute their vote and suppress their vote. As was mentioned in the chairman's remarks earlier, in Texas, 95% of the growth in Texas was due to people of color, predominantly Latino. Yet, all of the districts that were created for Republican white voting districts. So I want to start with Mr. Sines. Mr. Sines, you and I worked together on many of these issues for a long time. Tell us how changes in the Voting Rights Act would protect us and prevent a legislature from doing what they did this last time, where even though the population growth was people of color, the results were that they packed Democrats into districts and created more white Republican districts.
Absolutely. As I mentioned in my testimony, we have seen in 3 different states a total of 18 lost Latino majority districts. 10 of those come out of Texas. And that's despite, as you know, half of the growth of the state being Latino in the last decade. Those 10 lost seats are in Congress, State House, State Senate, and on the State Board of Education. How a reinvigorated Voting Rights Act through the John Lewis Act would address that is clear. Texas would be required under the John Lewis Act, under both the geographic preclearance formula and the known practices coverage formula, would be required to submit its redistricting statewide for pre-review and pre-clearance, either by the Department of Justice, or as you know, as Texas has decided in several occasions in the past, or by a 3-judge district court in Washington, D.C. That would efficiently determine whether there was retrogression, as there clearly has been in the maps adopted this year, or last year rather, and whether there has been intentional voter discrimination, as Texas has been adjudicated over several redistricting rounds. So instead of being mired in litigation that because of the delay in census data and because of your early primary in Texas will not be resolved before the 2022 primary elections move forward, instead we would have, through preclearance, very efficiently and effectively prevented these violative redistricting lines from ever taking effect. The result today, because of the failure of the Senate to enact the John Lewis Act, is that we will have in 2022 these violative lines in place in Texas.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I only have like 40 seconds. I will yield my 40 seconds to my colleague and friend, Lucy Macbeth, when her time comes at the end of the hearing.
Ms. Macbeth has already spoken. If she'd like some more time, she certainly.
Oh, well, I apologize. I was on the floor and I did not know that. I thought she was going to be left for the end of the hearing, as you stated. So if she wants 40 seconds, she can have them.
Well, let me ask Ms. Macbeth a question. You got in redistricting in